Not too long ago, I did a stream where I ranked every single Pokemon sprite from the first generation of Pokemon, and it was really fun. I really like this confused-ass Pidgey. Huh? Huh? It wasn't anything too serious, like I'm not an artist, let alone a sprite artist, but sometimes I look at stuff and it makes me happy. And that's very much the case for these sprites, honestly. I really am fond of quite a lot of them. Honestly, a big part of why I wanted to do a video on this is that I've seen a lot more Gen 1 sprite appreciation in general lately, and that's really awesome to see. I mean, I remember back in 2010's YouTube, if anyone was ever talking about Gen 1 Pokemon sprites, it really was to kind of poke fun at them for how ugly they were. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're counting down the top 10 ugliest sprites in Pokemon RBY. Did you know that Hitmonchan in red and green looked like a Doduo taking a freaking dump? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Now, I promise I'm not trying to gaslight you into thinking that every sprite from the first generation of Pokemon is good or anything. Like, red and green notoriously have some pretty rough ones. Blue and yellow fumble the bag here and there. And then there's some special cases like the Machop line, which is just 9 straight sprites of disappointment if you're asking me. Obviously, everything in this video is just my opinion. Shouldn't have to be said, but, you know, we're talking about Pokemon here, and Pokemon fans are notorious for killing each other in the streets over whether trash or garbage is better. That's just how we are, what can I say? So, before anything, I'd like to talk about a handful of Pokemon that I think have great sprites in all 3 iterations. So, red and green, blue, and yellow. And the first Pokemon I'd like to talk about in that group is Aerodactyl. And the reason for that is that I think Aerodactyl is sort of a great introduction to why I like so many of these sprites so much. So all 3 Aerodactyl sprites have very distinct poses, and what I like about these is that they're quite dynamic. Like, it gives the impression that they're in the middle of an animation or something, and that's quite ambitious considering they were working with 56 by 56 sprites here. And what I like about that is your mind kind of fills in the blanks a bit, you know? Like, when I look at the red and green Aerodactyl, I kind of imagine it just taking off, you know? And then I look at the blue one, and I imagine it, like, diving down for an attack. And I look at the yellow one, and I kind of imagining it, like, circling you, kind of like a vulture would, kind of like eyeing you up, looking for a weak spot or something like that. And in a way, that kind of ties into what Aerodactyl actually does. It's a fast, strong Pokemon that's meant to kind of finish off weakened opponents. How good it is at that is up in the air, but you know, that's neither here nor there, that's fine. Another Pokemon that has 3 great sprites in the first generation of Pokemon is Pikachu. This is an obvious one, because all of them are the funny chubby Pikachu. And listen, I don't think I've seen chubby Pikachu slander in my entire life. I'm pretty sure just everyone is on board with chubby Pikachu. It's like one of the 3 things that Pokemon fans universally agree on. Like, yeah, chubby Pikachu's cool as fuck. And I like all 3 of these sprites. I think they're cool as fuck. I will say though, some people were not too happy when, on stream, I said that blue Pikachu was my least favorite of the 3. A lot of people really enjoy his little jumpy jump that he's doing and the little sparks coming off him. And that's cool, I do think it's a great sprite. But I don't know, personally, I just like my Pikachus looking a little bit more vacant. Like, yellow's just standing there, it's very cute. And red and green Pikachu's just looking like they're trying their best to, like, construct a silly little thought in their silly little head for the first time. I don't know, I definitely see the appeal of jumpy blue Pikachu. But personally, I gotta give the edge to yellow and red and blue. Big fan. However, a Pokemon with some less universally loved sprites that I think has amazing sprites in all 3 iterations is Exeggutor. I don't give a fuck what anyone says. I think blue Exeggutor looks fucking great. They look like a fucking monster. And they are. They're a fucking walking tree with sentient coconuts. The head in the middle that's looking down at you is making a face that I genuinely cannot put into words. I don't know what this is, but I'm all for it. And then the 2 on the sides just look absolutely just zonked. And I love it. They're brilliant. Red and green Exeggutor is a sprite I've very rarely seen people talk about, but I like it a lot. It's very similar to the blue one in concept. It's kind of like a slightly cleaner version of that, if you will. But I do think I slightly prefer the blue one. Both are great though. And then the yellow Exeggutor is actually just like a really clean, well-made sprite. It's not as fucking scary as the other 2, which is a bit of a shame. But this is undeniably a fantastic sprite that still keeps a little bit of that imposing, bizarre nature of Exeggutor. And Game Freak knew it was a good-ass sprite, because they used it again in Pokemon Gold. And one more Pokemon that I think looks great in all 3 iterations, and funnily enough, again, I've seen bullied a lot for one specific sprite, is Blastoise. Now, I do think all 3 are great, but the one I'd like to focus on primarily is the red and blue one. And I'll be honest, I don't really like Blastoise that much. It's one of my least favorite starters by a long shot, and I'm not really sure why. Something about Blastoise just being a big turtle with metal cannons attached to it didn't really do it for me. Like, it just felt kind of boring. But I will say, I think Blue Blastoise is brilliant. Because, yeah, Blastoise essentially is just a big turtle with cannons. But Blue Blastoise makes it look like the big turtle with cannons. This is a sprite that I've seen people shit on a lot, like, oh look, it's the big fat Blastoise, and I'm like, yeah, but that's fucking sick. Like, look at his face. Look how absolutely fucking sure of himself this guy is. He's the big turtle on the block. And if you have anything to say about it, you'll have to fucking take it up with him. Look how just proud and defiant he is. I love this sprite. I think it's one of the best Blastoise sprites, I'll be real with you. But, again, I do like the red and green one and the yellow one. The red and green one looks very angular, if that makes sense. Weirdly enough, I think out of the 3, this is the one that gives the most turtley kind of vibe. I will say as well that the blue sprite has some kind of funky anatomy, like I'm not really sure what this arm is doing. And the red and green one fixes that. Everything just looks right, like this definitively looks like something Blastoise would do. The yellow Blastoise, on the other hand, is just fucking going at it. I kind of like this, and I kind of don't. I'm not really sure how to feel about it. It's a really good looking sprite, and it's a very fun pose. But I'm not sure if it's a pose I would see Blastoise actually making. If anything, the yellow Blastoise sprite kind of reminds me of Bob from Tekken. Like this very large-bodied character who is just incredibly nimble despite that. I don't know. I go back and forth on this one a lot, but I do think it's a great sprite. So, with that out of the way, I'd like to specifically take a look at some of the Pokemon Blue sprites. I know red and green came first, but I think the blue sprites are the ones that most people will be familiar with. And right off the bat, we gotta talk about Golbat. Red and blue Golbat was like the go-to Gen 1 sprite to make fun of. And honestly, I'm so glad that people are starting to turn around on this one, because I'll be real, this is a perfect sprite. And in my opinion, this is the absolute best that Golbat has ever looked. I know so many people looked at this sprite and were like, wow, look how ugly and fucked up it is. And I'm like, yeah? Good? I mean, look at Golbat. It's a massive fucked up bat that is around 70 to 80% mouth that just jumps people in dank caves. Of course it's fucked up and nasty looking. And like, this is the only Golbat to really go all in on the tongue. And of course Golbat has a big fucking tongue. Like I said, it's mostly fucking mouth. What's in your goddamn mouth? A fucking tongue? Again, like I said earlier, with how a lot of these sprites kind of give the impression that these Pokemon are in the middle of an animation or like doing something very dynamic, I would fucking love to know what bro is in the middle of here. What could he possibly fucking do? He's up to some absolutely devious shit, I can imagine. I mean, Golbat is a devious-ass Pokemon. In competitive RBY, they're most known for having a very small and very funny Ubers niche and beating up children. Of course they're a fucking menace. But yeah, personally, I'm very, very happy to see the public opinion on Red and Blue Golbat shift a little bit. I am all for it. I think this is a great fucking sprite, and I'm glad more and more people are starting to share that opinion. So, with my little Golbat hyperfixation out of the way, let's move on to a sprite that everyone already knew was fucking brilliant, and that's Red and Blue Tentacruel. This is without a doubt one of the absolute best sprites in Gen 1. It might be the best sprite in Gen 1. It might be the best sprite Tentacruel has ever had. It might be the best sprite in the entire series. It's fucking badass. The sheer confidence in this sprite is fucking staggering. I went on about how, oh, these sprites look like they're in the middle of an animation. This one doesn't. He's waiting. Bro is waiting for you to make a fucking move. And it's awesome. And I know, obviously, these sprites were not made with how good these Pokemon would be in a hypothetical community-made meta years on in the future. But I think the fact that Tentacruel is the best Pokemon in UU just makes this sprite even more badass. I forget who said this, but I remember someone saying that Tentacruel was like the bouncer for the overused tier, right? Not actually in overused, but better than every single Pokemon below it. And this sprite somehow captures that so well. Like, all the overused ones are just having a grand old time in their silly little space, and Tentacruel's just waiting outside, making sure no fucking UU or NU mons can sneak in, thinking that they can hang out with the big boys. No chance. And if you want to get in, you gotta take it up with Tentacruel. And he knows he can take anyone coming up to him. And I'm just saying, the one time Tentacruel was not the best Pokemon in UU. The one time these two schmucks thought they could get the better of him. Oh, a few weeks later they had a bit of an accident. Yeah, unfortunate. You hate to see it. But either way, Tentacruel is back to the #1 Pokemon in UU, and this sprite is just such a perfect reflection of that. And honestly, listen, if you've never heard of an OU, a UU, an NU, you don't know anything about any of that. It don't matter, because this sprite is still just objectively fucking brilliant. Anyone can look at this and think, this is fucking cool. The next one I'd like to talk about is a bit of an oddball one, because it's not a Pokemon I ever really think about all that much, but it just randomly has a fantastic sprite in Red and Blue. Which is even more strange because it's sandwiched between two sprites that are kind of janky and fucked up. And that's Graveler. Graveler's got a weirdly fantastic sprite in Red and Blue. And again, it's kind of odd because Geodude and Golem kind of don't. To me, this is sort of like the perfect example of how dynamic some of these sprites feel. Again, that sort of mid-animation feeling. Because the way I see it, this sprite really looks like it's just about to attack, right? Graveler's in the middle of curling up into a ball, ready to roll at you. And funnily enough, a lot of what I'm saying about Graveler also applies to Golem in Pokemon Yellow. To me, both of these sprites give off the impression that these Pokemon are in the process of going in for an attack, and they sell that really well. And on top of that, there's a lot of character in these, because on top of the fact they look like they're attacking you, they look pretty fucking smug about it, right? They look pretty coy. They look like they think they're gonna come out of this on top. Like, the face on Graveler looks fantastic, and I love the kind of cheeky look that Golem has. To me, Golem kind of looks like it's doing, like, sort of a shoulder bash, but I would imagine that instead of going for a traditional shoulder bash, it would sort of, like, you know, tuck its arm in, and then roll up into a ball, and then just start rolling at you. See, I love, maybe this is stupid, but I love thinking about stuff like this. You know? All these silly little sprites plant ideas in my head, and they're just really fun to think about. These are two phenomenal sprites, and one of them is on a Pokemon that I really don't think much of at all. Like, I don't think Graveler is on anyone's mind all that often, so this is a really, really cool sprite to see in my opinion. Wouldn't you know it, we've got another poison type with a phenomenal fucking sprite. I think Muck looks fantastic in Red and Blue. Out of every single appearance of Muck in the games, I think Red and Blue looks the most intimidating by a long shot. Over time, Muck starts to kind of feel more and more pathetic, like it is actually just, to put it lightly, a heap of shit. Just actual sludge that's barely clinging to life. Red and Blue gives the vibe that Muck is this sort of, like, monster, you know? Like this weird blob creature out of a 1950s horror movie or something like that. Something that just rolls through the town, absorbing people, right? It actually looks kind of intimidating, and managing to get that out of what is essentially just a pile of sludge is pretty fucking badass. For the record, I think it looks good in red and green and yellow as well, but in a different way. The red and green sprite is kind of just doing what the red and blue one does, but not quite as well in my opinion. And the yellow one's kind of weird. It kind of looks like it's coming at you from an angle, which for a Pokemon like Muck is a bit weird, but I think they're both quite good. Also, I will say, Muck in Silver also looks very badass, and I distinctly remember someone telling me that Muck in Ruby and Sapphire looks really fucking cool. And you know what? Yeah, they were kind of right. This is fun. I like him. And lastly, to wrap up Red and Blue, I want to look at a real cutie. You know, a lot of the Pokemon that I'm talking about I think are like cool, but no, this is just a really cute sprite. And that's Slowpoke. Look at this little Lumpo. Look at this itty bitty Oingo Boingo. Not a care in the fucking world. Red and green has a decent Slowpoke. It looks a bit too dopey, honestly. Kinda gives me Sid the Sloth vibes, I won't lie.
It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
And then the yellow one is cute, but it's just kind of uninterestingly cute, if that makes sense. It's not really capturing Slowpoke's personality all that well. But this is such a vibe. You couldn't have any better captured the essence of Slowpoke. Just an absolute lump of a Pokemon. Just well and truly unbothered. Like, look at this little guy. How could you ever be mad at him? He's just taking it day by day, a day at a time. Just a definition of an it is what it is Pokemon. And he fucking loves it. Look at the smile on his big old face. He doesn't even know what he's smiling about. He saw something 3 days ago and he just figured out what it was. And he's like, oh yeah, that was cool actually. This is amazing. In my opinion, a perfect Slowpoke. Absolutely phenomenal sprite. I love this little guy. How could you not? They did fuck up Slowbro real bad though. I do not like red and blue Slowbro. Again, this is like too dopey. I will say, I think red and green and yellow have really good Slowbros though. Red and green is just like a good version of the red and blue one. I don't like how weird the tail looks on the red and blue one and how much of the sprite the shoulder takes up. And then the yellow one is just like amazing. Like, look at him. He hasn't had a thought in years. Not a single thought. He's brilliant. How could you not love this guy? Well, I couldn't because I fucking hate Slowbro, but that's kind of different. Don't worry about it. Now, the next one I'd like to talk about is a Pokemon with some very, very interesting sprites, and that is Parasect. Blue Parasect is a sprite a lot of people quite like, and I 100% agree. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I can see not liking it because I guess the anatomy's a little wonky maybe, and the mushroom does take up a lot of space, but I think that's actually perfect. Like, the entire concept of Parasect is that the insect itself is barely clinging to life, and the mushroom is what controls it. Parasect is a whole lot of para and not a lot of sect, and this captures that perfectly in my opinion. Obviously the mushroom takes up quite a lot of the sprite, that's the main focus, but I really enjoy how you can just see the insect itself kind of peeking under, like how the top half of the eyes are cut off by the mushroom hanging over it. You know, it really brings to your attention that the mushroom is the main focus here, and it just happens to be sort of piloting this creature. Now, Yellow Parasect is an interesting one. It's a much better looking sprite just on a purely visual level. It captures Parasect's design very well. But in terms of conveying like the concept of Parasect and its character, that's where I think it drops the ball a bit. I think Parasect kind of leaning back with its mouth open and the mushroom being more of a background focus. I'm not a massive fan of that. It does really just look like an insect that happens to have a mushroom on its back. Like, the insect kind of looks in control here. He's just living his life. He's kind of unbothered. And that's where I think this sprite fumbles a bit. However, a sprite I haven't seen a ton of people talk about that I think is great is the red and green Parasect. To me, this is the perfect middle ground between the two. It's got that kind of dead look that the blue one has, and the mushroom is still very, very large, much larger than the yellow one, but it still distinctly looks dead, right? Like, if you had never heard of Parasect in your life, you had no idea what the concept behind the Pokemon was, I think this one would do a better job of getting across than the blue one. Again, it's kind of the perfect middle ground here. You really convey the sense of what Parasect is like the blue sprite, but it's a very, very good looking sprite like the yellow one. Again, the blue one is a little bit wonky in some areas, and I can see not liking that. So, massive fan of this one for sure. Funnily enough, another case of blue and yellow both doing something right and then red and green putting them both together in one badass sprite is Mr. Mime. Now, blue Mr. Mime is a sprite that a lot of people have made fun of in the past, and I'm not going to defend this one. I don't like it. It looks very goofy. Chubby Pikachu is cool, but I'm not feeling it with Mr. Mime. Although I will say, I like that he's doing like the Mr. Mime thing with his hands. That's a nice touch. And again, in a similar vein to Parasect, I think the yellow Mr. Mime sprite is a great looking sprite, but it's just a little bit weird for Mr. Mime. Like, he looks a little bit too battle ready. I'm not sure why Mr. Mime of all fucking Pokemon is angry. Like, that in itself is a little bit strange. But then you've got the red and green sprite, which in my opinion is a perfect Mr. Mime. Like, it's got the better proportions of the yellow sprite, but this is something Mr. Mime would actually do. He's just got that goofy little expression, he's got his hands up, you know, doing the whole barrier stuff. Honestly, something kind of interesting I noticed with red and green is that they do a lot of those rather strange one-stage kind of humanoid Pokemon really well. Like Pokemon like Magmar, Electabuzz, Jinx, Mr. Mime, Hitmonlee. They've all got really, really good sprites in Red and Green. It's very interesting. I really like a lot of these. And wouldn't you know it, another very important Pokemon that Red and Green absolutely knocks out of the park in my opinion is Mewtwo. The blue Mewtwo is very, very iconic, and I kind of get what they're going for by making it lean forward so much. Like, it is Mewtwo, it's a very fucking intimidating Pokemon. But I don't know, the huge head and the fucking gamer back aren't really doing it for me. And the yellow Mewtwo is a cool idea. I get what they're going for by kind of making it like, you know, thrust forward, kind of like, look at me, you know, look how imposing I am. I get what they're going for, but it's not really doing it for me. But the red and green Mewtwo is just kind of perfect. It's a very simple sprite. It's not doing anything too fancy, but it's just really good. The anatomy is on point. It's not doing a fancy pose, but it's Mewtwo. I don't really think it needs to. It simply needs to stand there and be Mewtwo. That's fucking intimidating enough, right? Another sprite in red and green that I couldn't go without mentioning is Clefable. This is an absolutely incredible sprite. On stream, I actually rated it as the single best sprite in red and green. And I might be a little bit biased. I mean, it is doing the :3 face after all, which, like, come on, like, you can't say no to that, right? But really, it's just a very fun sprite, and I love looking at it. Like, I didn't really like the blue Clefable, and it took me a while to figure out why. But I think it's because the sprite feels sort of at odds with itself. Like, they've got their left foot and their hands in the air like they're doing a funny little dance. But then they're, like, standing completely straight and they've got a very neutral smile. I don't know, it just doesn't really work for me. I think the fact that the red and green sprite is, like, at an angle, you know, I love that. That's very fun. That's very quirky. And then the yellow Clefable is just, like, good. I don't have a ton to say about it. I like how it looks like they're looking at something off to the side going like, ooh, you know, that's fun. That's fun. But yeah, the red and green one is incredible. Now, a Pokemon a lot of you will be very familiar with if you've been around here for a while is Porygon. And again, I fucking adore the red and green Porygon. I think this is a phenomenal one. The blue one is fine. I think it looks good, but the angle's a little bit off. Trying to, like, look at Porygon kind of head-on is a bit strange. Its face kind of looks like a really upset ice cream cone. And the left foot... Sorry, I had to think about it for a second if that was the left one. Yeah, that is the left one, isn't it? The left foot looks a little weird. Like, it could kind of benefit from being a bit closer to the body, but overall it's fine. I hate the yellow one. I hate yellow Porygon. Not completely sure why. I think it's fucking atrocious. But the red and green one, love them. Massive fan. Feels very compact. I like that the head is very, very large. I think that's fun. Funnily enough, I really like the shading on this sprite. And on top of that, I like that there's no sort of, like, black lines on the body separating the different shades. I'm not sure why, but I think that looks really, really good. I think this is a fantastic sprite. It's very clean. It captures, like, the essence of what Porygon is very well. Huge fan of this one. One of the best sprites in red and green. And lastly, there's one more sprite from red and green I'd like to talk about. And weirdly enough, I don't actually think it's the best looking of the three, but I still really, really appreciate it nonetheless. And that's Gyarados. Now, out of the three Gyarados sprites, I think blue has the coolest looking one. Like, it just looks so absolutely fucking vicious. I'm a massive fan of that. But what I like about the red and green one is how similar it is to Magikarp. Red and green Magikarp and Gyarados are, like, at the exact same angle. They've both got their mouth open. The position of this top fin is, like, really, really similar. I don't know, maybe I'm stretching, but I kind of adore this. It's a really fun way of connecting two Pokemon that are visually extremely distinct, but nonetheless have an incredibly important connection. They're part of the same evolutionary line. That's a big part of, like, the appeal of Magikarp turning into Gyarados, like, the fact they look so different. But I really, really like this. Again, I do think the blue one looks cooler, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't kind of adore this. And to wrap things up, there's a handful of sprites from Pokemon Yellow I'd like to take a look at. Honestly, I don't have a ton to say about a lot of these, because on the whole, Pokemon Yellow has the best sprites, but a lot of them are just, like, uninterestingly fantastic, if that makes sense. I think the sprites in Yellow are on the whole better, but the best sprites in Pokemon Red are better than the best sprites in Pokemon Yellow, and Yellow fumbles a lot of Pokemon that had really good sprites in Red and Blue, if that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, because on the whole the sprites are so good, the ones that stick out as, like, extra good, you know, don't have a ton to say about them. But there are a few I really, really enjoy. The first one I'd like to touch on is Rapidash, and I think this one looks genuinely incredible. It takes a Pokemon I really don't think all that much about, and just does something so sick with it. It's just such a clean sprite, right? It's angled really well, the perception is fantastic. I love the shaping of the fire and such. It kind of looks like a comet in a way. And that's essentially what Rapidash is. Like, it's a speeding fast horse coming at you while it's on fire. It really is kind of a comet or something like that. I'm a huge fan of this one, and it's one of the best depictions of Rapidash in my opinion. Just looks insanely cool. Another fire type who does really well for themselves in yellow in my opinion is Charizard. Now, I don't dislike the blue Charizard or the red and green Charizard. I think they both do a few things really well. I think my main issue with the blue Charizard is the fact that they have the head down and you can't see the mouth. For something that is essentially a massive fire-breathing dragon, I know it's not a dragon, but you know what I mean, not being able to see the mouth I think is a bit disappointing. And then in the red and green sprite you can see the mouth, and there is fire coming out of the mouth, which is very cool. But the anatomy in the red and green sprite is a bit fucking goofy. It looks a bit like a weird newt that kind of caught on fire and happened to grow wings. It's trying its best, but it's a bit goofy. In my opinion, the yellow Charizard absolutely hits the nail on the head. It's not breathing fire, like, actively like the red and green one, but it looks like it's about to, right? It's leaning back, has its, like, belly out. It looks like it's just readying itself to unleash a fire blast or something like that. The shaping is really well done, the anatomy is perfect unlike the red and green one. To me, this is one of the best Charizard sprites. I'm a massive fan of this one. Kind of reminds me of the blue Blastoise in that it just looks very sure of itself. It looks like they know they're going to come out on top. Which for RBY isn't very fitting, but that's neither here nor there. And while we're on the topic of pretty fucking bad Pokemon that nonetheless look extremely fucking sure of themselves, Arbok. Goddamn, I love this Arbok sprite. The fact that it's completely dead on, Arbok's looking at you dead center is fantastic. In-game, it wouldn't make a ton of sense because Arbok's not really looking at the opponent Pokemon, but it's looking at you. It's looking at you. It's like, fuck are you gonna do about it, huh? What are you gonna do? I'm gonna glare you, I'm gonna spam rap until you're dead. What are you gonna do about it? In reality, you could outspeed it and hit it with an Earthquake or a Psychic and it'd probably die, but you know, it's the thought that counts. They're trying their best, right? And that's awesome. Massive fan of this one. Brilliant sprite. Funnily enough, Arbok on the whole has really good sprites in RBY, I think. I'm a massive fan of the red and green one. It kind of looks like an actual Cobra. But nonetheless, the yellow one is by a long shot my favorite. And one last one from yellow I'd like to talk about is Squirtle. Look at this little itty bitty needy baby. Look at those eyes. How could you not fall for this little character immediately? This is one of the absolute cutest sprites in the first generation of Pokemon. I'm in love with this one. Can you fucking imagine picking your starter and one of the three looks at you like this? What are you supposed to do? How do you not pick them? They're looking at you like, no, please, don't pick Bulbasaur or Charmander. Pick me. And you would fucking pick them. No wonder this was in yellow where you can't choose your starter. Because, like, who's not gonna pick this? It was probably a fucking last minute change to give you Pikachu. They were like, alright, there's a Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle. Fuck! We made Squirtle too cute. Who's not gonna pick this? Fuck! We've ruined the balance of the game. Make them use Pikachu. They're stuck with Pikachu. We'll figure it out later. I love this sprite. Amazing. Fantastic. 10 out of 10. So, that's mostly it. Those are a bunch of sprites in the first generation of Pokemon that I think are really fucking good. If you have any of your own, please share. I'm very much enjoying this Gen 1 sprite appreciation that's going on right now. But before we wrap things up completely, I would like to very quickly mention my absolute favorite sprite from the first generation of Pokemon. Not the best in my opinion, but just my favorite. And that's Blue Nidoqueen. And it's mostly just because I think it's funny. Look at her. She's just so fucking unbothered. Look at that completely vacant, neutral expression. This is the face of a mom that's stuck watching Despicable Me 3 with her two least favorite kids, you know? Like, the movie's not bad enough to make her angry or anything, but it's, like, not good to the point where she's actually feeling anything. Just completely blank, dead expression. I don't know why I find this one so funny. It's just, I like it. Nidoqueen. Big fan. But yeah, that's it. Stan Nidoqueen. Bye.